how do you guys actually view this offseason for the New York Mets? Was it successful? Was it like late and they're in a reaction mode to make moves? Like, how do you guys feel about this? Brandon, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I have serious questions about the fit of all these kind of new players, plus the subtraction of some of their other stars. You talk about guys like Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz now, departuring from this team, and then you're just
Mhm.
refilling them. It seems like with guys in other positions. You're talking about Freddy Peralta, who's a starter, who obviously they need starting pitching help, um, but we'll see how that all plays out. I mean, Bo Bichette playing potentially at third, cool, making 42 million, good for him, I guess. But I don't know how that's all going to work out. I mean, their lineup could be interesting. You talk about Robert Jr. I mean, he's obviously a powerful bat, and he might be able to fit into that lineup and maybe fill some of that Alonso power. But he's such a streaky guy that I would be very, very surprised if he went and had some kind of crazy year. Like, there's going to be a lot of questions about this team, I think, once we get to spring training and into the regular season. But hey, now they've got a lot of talent and they can potentially change that narrative with a hot start, and maybe they can find their way back to the playoffs. But for now, I find myself very skeptical in terms of what I think they'll do in the regular season.
Yeah, I think it was a great pivot. I think just based on the fact that, like you suggested earlier, and posing that question, Justin, it felt like the market was held up with Kyle Tucker. Obviously, some teams made some moves earlier in the season. You look at the Blue Jays with Cease and what have you, but it did feel like, whoa, the Mets are another team that just they missed the boat last year with Soto, and then you're going, okay, well then what? So it was. I think they pivoted pretty well, where a lot of other teams wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so. I think everyone's looking at free agency and seeing like, oh, well, there's all of the market. The market is now dried up now that your Tuckers, your Bichettes, and then I guess your Bellingers, if you want to group them in with that, of the world are now gone. But they've found means to sort of fill holes. To your point, Brandon, you're probably a little bit more well versed to know the fit. I'm not really sure about the fit, but I think it's fair to suggest that you're already going to slot a guy like Bichette in a position he hasn't really played in the majors before. So you're already sort of risky in that respect. And you've paid a lot of these guys a lot of money, or you've paid Bichette a lot of money, I think you could point to. Not that it matters in baseball, but in a sense, you're paying for a guy, you're overpaying for guys in the market that would probably get less elsewhere. So I don't know. I think it would be considered recency bias. I would say they've done a really good job filling a lot of holes, but yeah, I guess you want to see it what the fit is like when the season actually kicks off. You want to sort of push away from the disaster that was the Mets season last year, and hopefully this puts them in a better position to at least make the playoffs and make some noise. But I guess we'll have to see what happens in late March, early April.
Christian,
It's
I was just gonna say, do you think when you think about Bo Bichette going there, do you think it actually works? Like him playing third base?
I I don't think that's going to be a great fit defensively when we had him in his natural position and it wasn't going great defensively. I think maybe at least partially the reason for why the Jays, we don't even really know if they presented him a real offer in free agency. And I think part of that reason is because I don't know if they view the defense maybe even plateauing. Like, I don't know. Would you be surprised if first off, like his sprint speed around the bases, Bo Bichette I'm talking about, isn't great. That applies to just defensively in the infield. He doesn't have the greatest arm. You just need him to be a bat. You need him to be that bat. You're gonna have DH at bats taken up by Jorge Polanco, who I guess they're gonna have playing first as well for the first time ever in his career. To have two of your infielders playing playing third and first for basically the first times in their entire MLB careers, it's ambitious. So that part of it, I think it's very fair to question. I think with basically right now in baseball, with the top four salaries, market wise, being the Dodgers, the Mets, the Jays, and the Phillies, money doesn't feel like an object. Like I don't know how much to criticize or not criticize 42 million for Bo Bichette over 3 years with these opt-outs. Like it really doesn't matter much, especially with the wasteland of free agency going forward and the CBA stuff looming. Who knows what the hell's happening there? It definitely was a reactionary offseason from the Mets, but on paper, at least the names they're bringing in look great offensively. Defensive question marks for sure. And the chemistry fit, I think it's fair to question because you guys mentioned it. It was a bad chemistry fit last year for the Mets. That's what it was. Who's to say that doesn't continue this year? I know they turned it around later in the year, but I will say, as someone who doesn't watch the Mets too closely, just looking at that team, it's a pretty hateable team, which I like. When you're talking about New York, the Yankees are very hateable. I think I could hate watch the Mets pretty well this year, which I don't mind. I like some villains in MLB, and they're definitely stepping into that role.
Well, I look at that lineup though, and I think it's pretty dangerous throughout. Like I think that they have weapons throughout the lineup now. I think obviously Lindor's gonna do some damage. Obviously, Soto's gonna get his. I think Bo Bichette's obviously one of the best hitters, or at least was one of the best hitters in the AL, if not the best hitter in the entire league last year in terms of just being able to put the ball in the bat. And then you have Marcus Semien that you added, which is better for offensive numbers as well. Robert, we'll see if he can bounce back to his all-star form. But you just think that they have options throughout the lineup now. I think the Mets overall, if you're a fan of the New York Mets, you have to be thinking about this in a positive light compared to where you were a week ago. And thinking about what the team looked like going into the season. They needed starting pitching, and they went out and got the biggest guy on the market in trade market, in my opinion, Freddy Peralta. So you have to give them props for that. But yeah, the Mets are going to be an interesting team this year. I think it's going to be a team that I wouldn't say hate watch, Christian, but I would say they're going to be a team that everyone is going to be watching throughout the year just to see how these parts play with each other and what they're able to actually do and if they mesh well or if they mesh bad, because people are going to be watching either way because it's the New York Mets and obviously one of the biggest payrolls in baseball. But yeah, that's all I really had on the New York Mets. The only other thing
I want to hone in on the Bo part of this though, just from a Toronto perspective.
Yeah.
Now that we've heard him speak at a press conference, he's put out his statement through Hazel May. I don't know, just how are you guys in the aftermath of Bo leaving? What is this now? A week after the fact? I think 6 days. I think it was last Friday. So where are we all at as Toronto-based fans here?
I mean, for Bo, it was not Bo would have never gotten this money if he stayed with the Blue Jays. So he said in his press conference he was destined to be a Met. That's a lie. That was just, they loaded up the Brinks trucks and said, I'm going to give you $42 million. Okay, I'm going to be a Met. That's what literally just happened because he was going to be a Philly if not. So I don't buy the fact that he wants to be a Met long term. I just think he saw an opportunity to cash in and make $42 million a year. And how can you fault the guy? That's just the way I look at it. There's no harsh feelings. There's no oh, you left the Blue Jays. I get it. The Marner thing's probably, I'm not obviously not Maple Leafs fan, but the Marner thing's probably a lot different than Bo Bichette leaving. Bo Bichette leaving it wasn't he just was I'm leaving town because I want to leave town. It was more so I'm kind of being forced out of town, kind of thing. Hey, they were interested in Kyle Tucker more than they were interested in Bo Bichette the whole offseason, according to reports. So it's more so it was expected, and I'm just happy Bo Bichette got his payday.
Yeah, he deserves it. I think it was pretty clear. I don't know if he ever outright said this earlier in the offseason, but the reports were that Bo Bichette will go wherever he gets paid the most. And so the fact that Jays fans were sort of braced for that, I think what doesn't help in that is that we know Rodgers is now willing to pay people. So it's not a conversation of, oh, did they offer him enough money? I'm sure if they had a chance to pivot after Kyle Tucker, maybe they take a run at Bo Bichette, but it wasn't a fully concerted effort. I know Shai Davidi interviewed Bo after yesterday's press conference briefly, and Bo did. It was sort of an awkward conversation. You kind of could see I don't know how I feel about answering these questions right after my Mets conversation, but he answered admirably. And he said they did feel like they made a pitch. There was conversation. So clearly there was back and forth. Who knows how detailed and how structured those conversations were. But I'm not upset. Yeah, if there was an actual number on the table, like you said earlier, Christian, as well. I don't think Jays fans are going to be upset. And there's so much nuance to the Marner thing and so much difference. Like, they're in the World Series. He hit a 3-run bomb to kick off this World Series Game 7. Like, what else are you going to ask from him? He was injured to start the playoffs. He did everything he could to put them in a good position, and he got priced out. And another team took a swing at him, and the Jays looked elsewhere. If he gets booed in Toronto, I'll be really surprised. I think they play
Same.
the 29-30, and they play Canada Day, do the Mets in
Yeah, they
Toronto
played
here, which is
that
kind of cool.
candidate set.
I think he deserves a lot of praise, so I'd be upset if he gets a lot of boos or hate.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely disappointing from a Jays fan perspective, but the money I think almost helps like lessen that pain because, like you guys have
Yeah.
all said, it's a money that nobody would have expected him to be able to make, and I don't know that the Jays would have ponied up to pay him that much. I don't know that I would have advocated for them to pay, a guy like Bo Bichette that much money. I mean, it'd be great under a 1-year potential scenario, but then you're kind of in the same situation again next year. So I think people would have been more excited about him obviously signing a long-term deal and sticking around for most of his career, like he had kind of said at certain points. But yeah, I mean, I think once you saw him, kind of the reaction to his contract and the way that he spoke about the team is I can't help but agree with Justin and say that a lot of that was very much just putting on a face so that he could, take the money and do what most athletes are going to do. And we've seen that with Kyle Tucker as well. So, yeah, hard to fault the guy. He did so much for the organization and truly believe that he was, one of the more important players, especially in the last, uh,
Yeah.
10 to 15 years of the franchise. You put him up there with some of the greats. So I mean, it is really disappointing. I really did want him to come back, and I think that's the one thing that people will look to if they choose to, is that Rogers probably could have kept Bo Bichette if they prioritized him over Kyle Tucker in this whole offseason. I think Tucker was, I'm not going to say is an easier negotiation, but if again that felt more like it was just going to come down to whoever was going to pay the most, and the Jays just kind of had to monitor the situation, knowing that Tucker was probably an option if they were going to be amongst the highest bidders. So I would have been more worried about them getting Bo done sooner, so that they could have potentially focused on Tucker there. But
I agree that the Kyle Tucker situation or the Kyle Tucker negotiation was and would have been easier if it got across the line. And the reason I bring up the Bo stuff is because I think really this entire conversation hinges on what the Blue Jays did last year. Like overall, this era in Blue Jays franchise history has been disappointing until last year. It was an awesome success, incredible. And I think it's fair to say that winning washes away a lot, right? Like I think our conversation and my answer would be different too if the Jays had a disappointing exit in the ALDS. And this is how the offseason played out with Bo specifically. Yeah, you'd feel the pain a lot more. And then I also, the thing that just I question is winning didn't seem to erase things for Bo Bichette, or almost winning, let's say that. Whit Merrifield had a quote on 6 Inning Stretch podcast, him and Lindsey Dunn. He said that stuff, quote unquote, stuff happened in past with the coaching staff and front office, and that could have affected negotiations with Bo. I'm just inferring here. This is just like speculatory stuff. Like you go to the ARB cases that these guys had with him kind of just getting stringed along through those years. And we hear this in every sport that has arbitration stuff, right? We hear about the arbitration being a touchy subject for players in every sport, hockey, whatever sport has arbitration. Some players take it better than others. And I think I would infer that Bo is not one of these people who was able to sweep it out under the rug. And I would have hoped that last year and all the winning might have been able to sweep that under the rug. We'll never know if, like I said, if the Jays even made an offer to him, if they just mutually agreed to kind of part ways essentially once the season ended. But like I said, winning erases everything. And I don't think we have to ask these uglier questions because we had an awesome season. We are very much looking forward to next season. We think we can get back to those same heights, even without Bo Bichette. But yeah, I wish there was maybe a more warmer side to Bo as far as leaving. I think he's a prideful guy, and his pride was maybe a little bit hurt at some point in this tenure with the Jays. That's all.
Yeah,
I would agree.